This week, it's time for danger, darkness, and dwarves as we jump into Deep Rock Galactic, a sci-fi FPS with procedurally generated caves, hordes of monsters, and good guys with big beards. We embrace our train spotter status and spend some time with the best transport managers on the market, some of which you can even play while travelling. And Nate and the 2-hour team transform into the Heroes of Hammerwatch, taking on a rogue-lite action adventure to see if it's worth your time. This is Player Attack. Hi, I'm Jessica Citizen, and this week everyone's getting just a little bit excited for E3. It's less than a month away now, and all over the world, fans are wondering just what big new games will be revealed at the world's largest gaming expo. The same thing happens every year, of course, and every year a handful of these big new games are leaked before the proper announcements. Often it's an accidentally uploaded trailer, a forgotten bit of code, or everybody's favourite, the domain registration that wasn't hidden quite as well as someone had hoped. This year, however, Walmart Canada may have let the cat out of the bag. Several cats, actually, out of several bags. The retailer updated its catalogue over the past week to include a number of new games, like Just Cause 4, Splinter Cell, Dragon Quest II for PS4 and Xbox One, LEGO DC Villains, Borderlands 3, Rage 2, Gears of War 5, Forza Horizons 5, a new expansion set for Destiny called Destiny Comet, and a game from Ubisoft simply titled Assassin's Creed. Realistically speaking, that list isn't particularly surprising. We've had some pretty serious suspicions about almost all of those games, and the ones we hadn't suspected aren't that shocking. Why wouldn't there be sequels to Rage and Just Cause? Of course, this is exactly the argument that Walmart Canada is using to cover up the technical glitch which revealed the titles. A spokesperson has declared the items listed were speculative in nature, and they apologise for any confusion the leak may have caused. As all the games featured placeholder box art and clearly made up release dates, the list could well just be someone at Walmart daydreaming rather than actually getting ahead of themselves. But then there's this from the official Twitter account for Bethesda's game Rage. And then there's this from the official Bethesda account. And then there's this, which proves that at least one of the games on that list is really happening. What a killer! Pete Hines from Bethesda has also gone on the record saying that even he is starting to get a bit excited about next month's festivities, promising that Bethesda's E3 showcase might be the publisher's longest ever, as the company has a lot to show. Moving right along though, let's talk loot boxes. Specifically, let's talk about how the Belgian Gaming Commission has formally suggested that criminal prosecution should be undertaken against Electronic Arts, Valve and Activision Blizzard over the inclusion of loot boxes in their games. The Commission's recent report featured a comprehensive definition of what does and does not constitute gambling, and it goes on to point out exactly how FIFA 18, Counter-Strike Global Offensive and Overwatch all contravene local legislation. Even though the Commission has called for immediate prosecution, Belgian Minister of Justice has met with industry stakeholders to discuss the matter. His window is shrinking quickly, however. The Commission has already started preparing the police reports. As well as taking legal action, the Commission has also recommended clear labelling for games containing loot boxes and restricting sales of those games to minors. Behind the scenes, the Commission has also asked for a clear indication of winning odds to be displayed, a cap to be placed on user spending, and for its own technical assessment team to be given access and control of the random number generators used for the loot drops. And don't think it's just the Belgians who will be impacted by the decision. The Commission has already spoken to similar bodies across Europe, Asia, and America. In other legal news, a man has been sentenced to jail in the US after carrying out a DOS attack on Blizzard's World of Warcraft servers back in 2010. Romanian citizen Kalin Mateus also pleaded guilty to one count of causing damage to a protected computer. He now faces 1 year in prison and must also pay nearly $30,000 to cover Blizzard's cost after thousands of players were unable to log in. According to prosecutors, the motivation behind the attacks was a juvenile desire to beat his rivals. Now, in super quick news, Deus Ex is not dead, but Eidos Montreal has admitted that we won't be seeing Deus Ex 5 anytime soon. Instead, the team is already way too busy working on Shadow of the Tomb Raider and The Avengers, which is already co-developing with Crystal Dynamics, plus a secret third game in development. PS4 hackers are celebrating the release of Parappa the Rapper Remastered, but not for the reason you might think. I mean, sure, some of them must be thrilled about the bare-bones re-release of the 90s PlayStation rhythm game, but it looks like Sony went really cheap when it came time to revamp this one for the new hardware. Remember, Parappa was re-released back in 2007 for the PSP, and a decade later, it seems the studio has decided that that version was plenty good enough for PS4 fans. Rather than writing new code or creating a specific port for the new console, Sony instead designed a 4K texture package and simply chucked the PSP copy onto the disc instead, along with a fully fledged PSP emulator. Of course, it didn't take long for clever people to work out how to use that emulator to load other games, so if you ever wanted to play something like Patapon on the big screen, now's your chance. Nintendo's first foray into the world of mobile gaming has been shut down after 2 years of service. The freemium app Miitomo launched in March 2016 and saw more than 10 million downloads within just a month of release. Unfortunately for Nintendo, just a few months after that, people somehow hadn't been hooked by the social networking game, and its player base dropped off sharply. Somehow, Miitomo survived for a further 18 months, but finally, on May 9th, 2018, it shut its doors for the last time. I'd say we'll miss it, but we haven't played it for years. Fans of the original Guild Wars who noticed a resurgence in developer attention recently have a couple of passionate ArenaNet employees to thank. The story is a bit of a strange one. The game's German data center blew up, almost literally, prompting a shift to US-based services, which slowed the game down, prompting another shift back to European-based ones as well as Amazon Web Services. While making the shift, studio technical director Stephen Clark Wilson noticed that there was a lot of cruft clogging up Guild Wars as we know it, so he started cleaning some of it out, enlisting the help of a colleague. The more the pair cleared out, the more they were inspired to fix other issues with the game, responding to player requests and feedback posts on Reddit. After a little while, there was enough stuff for ArenaNet to release a patch for the game, which added a higher level of detail, higher draw distance, improved anti-aliasing, and a stack of other graphics options, making the nearly 15-year-old game feel fresh and new again, and making a bunch of die-hard fans very happy. For more information on any of these stories, or to keep up to date with the latest gaming news, head to playerattack.com. But for now, stick around, we've got plenty more still to come. Deep Rock Galactic from Ghost Ship Games is a 1-to-4 dwarf cooperative shooter mining exploration game. You delve deep underground as one of 4 classes to collect valuable minerals while avoiding horrible space bugs.
Get on board! We're about to leave! Here we go!
The game initially throws you straight into a single-player mission with a floating robot companion providing some much-needed fire support. You have a handful of tools to make your spelunking a little easier, the most important of which is, of course, your pickaxe. Swing your pickaxe to both gather the all-important minerals and carve up the terrain. Rather than being stuck trudging through pre-built corridors, Deep Rock Galactic encourages you to dig new tunnels to break into other areas, create narrow climbing routes to reach otherwise inaccessible minerals, or just dig blindly in hopes of getting lucky. The area for each mission is procedurally generated, and there is a certain amount of sense programmed into it, so you'll generally find what you're looking for without needing to dig too blindly. But occasionally your mapping tool won't tell you there's another set of tunnels just behind a wall, and you'll only find it by exploring. While you are exploring the caves, there are certain rock formations and occasional bugs to light the way, and all of the dwarves have a very short range torch, but that is rarely enough. Unfortunately, each dwarf also has a set of flares that can regenerate over time, and so these are vital in lighting up the darker tunnels and corners. I mean, you can navigate blind to a certain extent, but that is a really good way to fall down a massive hole and get knocked out, or stumble into a swarm of monsters. Don't do that one. If you do get knocked out, either by falling or by a monster attack, your fellow dwarves can revive you. There's seemingly no timer on this, but if you do get KO'd while returning to the drop pod, they may not have time to rescue you and it will leave without you. It is better to leave one dwarf behind than two, as the game will reward you more handsomely per survivor.
See you in hell! Die, creep! Incoming! Make every bullet count! We're all gonna die!
Part of returning to the drop pod is sending back your mule, the dwarves call him Molly, with your gathered minerals. As you dig them up, you can call Molly over to you and tip your bucket of minerals inside for safekeeping. You have a limited personal inventory, so if you hit a particularly rich cave, expect to do that a lot. Everything you gather is shared amongst the team as well, and this makes sense because it's a cooperative game. The only thing standing in the way of your fabulous riches? The alien monsters. These are mostly arachnid in form for now, ranging from small ankle biters to some hulking monstrosities. Many will lurk in the shadows waiting for an opportunity to pounce, while others will rush straight at you. By themselves, none of them are really threatening so long as you've still got some ammo, but sometimes a swarm will come for you, which can be literally dozens of bugs. Be wary of shooting your teammates in the ensuing chaos. Each dwarf has his own set of weapons, but they're typically fairly standard fare. A rifle, shotgun, pistol, minigun or flamethrower, depending on your class. But they do differ once you start adding extra gadgets. The scout has a personal grappling gun, which is good for getting to hard to reach places, even though he can't take anyone with him. The gunner's zipline gadget is a little more limited, as the zipline can't be too steep, but it is motorised so you can go up or down quite freely. The driller has a slightly different kind of mobility gadget. In fact, he has two powerful drills attached to his arms. These are used to quickly bore out a tunnel to a new area, burrow up a wall to get to resources, or even do a bit of hardcore monster mashing. But the engineer's mobility assistant cannot be used offensively at all. The engineer shoots a glob of self-hardening goop at a wall to create a platform to stand on, making it easier for a scout to grapple up and mine out some minerals, or for a gunner to set out a zipline. On the other hand, though, the engineer gets sentry guns. These can chew up ammo and bugs in equal measure and can be recalled by the dwarf for reuse later. So, good idea to hang on to these ones for the swarms. Now, Deep Rock Galactic is still in early access and does have some rough edges as a result, but it's pretty fun already. It does need some longer term goals beyond simply upgrading your gear a few times, and a greater variety of monsters wouldn't hurt. But Ghost Ship Games are promising both of these in future updates. So if they can deliver on that, they will have a very nice game on their hands.
Don't waste your ammunition! Make every bullet count! Here we go! We're all gonna die! Hold yourself together! I can't feel my beard!
For many people, trains are just one part of your daily commute. They're something that takes you from point A to point B, hopefully with a minimum of fuss and saving you the hassles of needing to find a park or making sure the car has enough fuel. But for other people, trains are a way of life. They're a thing of beauty, an engineering marvel, an obsession. It might have started as kids watching Thomas the Tank Engine, but as they got bigger, so did the engines. If simply riding the rails isn't enough for you, here are 3 very different train games to help you pass the time. If you're lucky, you might even be able to play them on your commute. For long-time train spotters, there is, of course, one name that's synonymous with the genre, Transport Tycoon. First released back in 1994 and significantly revamped just a year later, it was by no means the first transport business simulator, but it took a lot of the best bits of the others and merged them into one glorious network. If you ever wanted to play SimCity without all the actual building stuff, Chris Sawyer and the team at Microprose had exactly what the doctor ordered. From its tinkly, jazzy soundtrack to the simple, neat isometric graphics, Transport Tycoon had it all. Either by yourself or racing against a handful of AI opponents, your task was to connect a map of industries and townships to help the local economy and make a decent amount of cash for yourself. Trace train tracks between the forest and the sawmill, send a fleet of boats to carry oil to the refinery, or fill trucks with livestock en route to the factory. While the original game still holds up very well, if you want something that's regularly updated, works just like the 90s classic, and is absolutely free to play, OpenTTD has come to your rescue. Created by a dedicated group of fans back in 2004, this open source homage now features an impressive library of vehicles and custom maps, and means an all-new generation can check out this bit of transport perfection. At the other end of the spectrum, there is the simply titled Train Simulator, available on Steam. The entry price starts at a perfectly reasonable $25, and it promises to fully immerse you in a world of trains, transporting you to a place where you decide what to do, where, and when. And while you're doing that deciding, you might like to check out some of the DLC that's on offer for the game. At last count, there are nearly 450 different DLC packs, each with a price tag varying from about $5 for a simple coach pack, up to the more significant $40 for an entirely new 98-mile route that winds around the British Isles. As you can imagine, all of them together add up to around $7,000, and while you do get an awful lot of trains and maps for that money, it still does get rather expensive. But nobody in their right mind would buy every single piece, much like you wouldn't buy every single type of biscuit on the supermarket shelf just because you enjoy tasty baked goods. Instead, each piece of Train Simulator DLC has been carefully designed with a very specific audience in mind. If you love iconic American locos and want to recreate the journey between Chicago and San Francisco, you should pick up the California Zephyr pack, but you can easily skip over the stuff that focuses on old-style British steam engines or the complicated and uber-accurate European maps. This one really is for the gunzills, the train spotters, the people obsessed with the finer details of the railway, but if that's what you identify as, it is perfect. And finally, a must-have for the minimalist train spotters, despite being more about maps than trains, Mini Metro. I've sung the praises of this one before, and after recently revisiting the game on Android, I am singing them again even more loudly. In a world where every game seems to want to cram more stuff into less space, Mini Metro takes a very different approach. It's one of the most minimal, pared-back experiences I've played in a long time, and is all the more enjoyable for it. The New Zealand-based developer has pared the concept of transport right back to its barest essentials, and then polished those up and presented them as a super addictive little package. While the other games on this list might let you place stations and manage vehicles, Mini Metro does all of that stuff for you. Instead, the game starts with a clean, white map with just 3 stations. More stations pop up throughout the course of the game, and passengers line up at each one. Each person is represented by the icon of where they'd like to go, and your task is simply to make sure they can get there by placing tracks between them. It's like an interactive, addictive subway map with layouts inspired by real-world locations including London, St. Petersburg, San Francisco, and even Melbourne. Create a shuttle system funneling everyone into a central loop, or a sprawling spaghetti tangle that tries to be everything to everyone. No matter what your approach, once you climb aboard the Mini Metro train, it will be a while before you can bring yourself to disembark.
Hello everyone, and welcome to 2 Hour Team, a show where we get a game, play for 2 hours, and then decide if we're going to refund it or keep it. I am Nate, playing as your mate Nate.
Hi, I'm Xavier, and I'll be playing today as Cyclonic.
Hey, I'm Harmony, and I'm playing as Keep Calm and Kill More Zombies.
Hello, I'm Warren, playing as Global.
And today we're having a look at the rogue-like action-adventure game, Heroes of Hammerwatch.
Heroes of Hammerwatch is a roguelike action game set in the same universe as Hammerwatch. Its style of gameplay is to go through randomly generated tower floors, which are essentially dungeon floors in a classic RPG, and has bosses every few levels. While going through the floors, the player would collect ore and gold, which is used to upgrade the town, and buy upgrades for the players.
The game has a nice scale of progression to it. As you continue to complete your levels in the game, you'll start to see more of the town come to life through the different materials and minerals that you return back to the town with each adventure into the mines.
The game mainly progresses by upgrading the town. When you upgrade the town, you would gain access to upgrading weapons, armor, character statistics, your potions, and even gaining access to starting items.
Making those early enemies that would kill you over and over again complete pushovers later on as you get stronger. This distinct feeling of progression is what entices and keeps drawing you in to keep exploring this dungeon to get more and more loot so you can upgrade the town and become stronger and stronger and stronger to see how far you can go through the dungeon. If you've decided to play multiplayer in this game, you can play cooperatively up to 4 people. In multiplayer, communication and teamwork is vital to success. If you stray away too far from the party, it's a good way to get the whole party killed very early on, as all members should be working together instead of going off in their own directions. There are also some really cool mechanics that comes with this game when you're working as a team. Like all loot is a shared kitty, where everyone picks up a piece of gold, it will go to the team's loot. But you can decide independently when you send your loot back to town. So if someone wants to send their loot back at floor 2, you can decide to send yours back at floor 3 if you're feeling a bit more a game than they are.
Something unique about the game is that it includes a concept of soul linking, where you can revive a fallen player, but if they die again, so do you. Very useful, but also very deadly, as it creates this domino effect where one person dying means the whole party dies.
So we were all linked by souls. So I think I was linked to Harmony, Harmony was linked to Warren, Warren was linked to you. So when one of us died, we went bang 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 bang. So no matter what health you have, when your soul link dies, you explode.
There were 4 classes available at the start: Paladin, Ranger, Sorcerer, and Warlock. The Paladin was a melee character, the Warlock a semi-melee character, and the Sorcerer and Ranger were both ranged characters. There were 3 unlockable classes as well. It felt that the game was somewhat unbalanced with the classes. The melee classes felt that they would struggle for most of the game, having to get up close to the enemies, whereas the ranged characters could just easily kite the enemies. Having played the Sorcerer, I felt like I could have easily soloed the floors due to one of my basic abilities bouncing off enemies and then bouncing towards other enemies. It also had numerous AoEs, giving it advantages in killing massive amounts of enemies that are grouped up while kiting them.
This game does a really good job of enticing the player to keep delving into the dungeon. The feeling of progression and upgrading the town kept me going through, and I know keep many other people going through that dungeon as well. The distinct feeling of growth is great. But the game itself is very repetitive, and I feel that over the course of time, over again, it's going to get repetitive and wear off very quickly. So on that note, I probably won't keep this game as it's not quite what I'll be after.
This is a fun game, and reminds me a lot of games I used to play on the Sega back when I was a kid. So I've ended up keeping it for now, and I look forward to playing a couple of games in the future.
Unfortunately, because it is that level by level style of game, with not much changing but the difficulty, I'm not keeping it.
The game felt like it was very repetitive, it had little story in it, and it felt like a really grind heavy game. I'm not keeping the game.
That's 1 person keeping it and 3 people returning it, and it's available on Steam if you want to check out this challenging rogue-lite game, Heroes of Hammerwatch. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
And that's about it for this edition of Player Attack. Thanks for watching. Next week, we visit the City of Brass, a deliciously difficult hack and slash set in a procedurally generated world created by former Bioshock developers now based in Australia. In the meantime, you can catch us at playerattack.com. We're on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you've got something you want to say, send us an email, mailbox@playerattack.com, or just hop on our forums. Also, if you'd like to support Player Attack, you can find us on Patreon and help us bring you the latest in gaming news, plus all these wonderful interviews and reviews from the world of video games. Till next week, I'm Jessica Citizen, and this is Player Attack.